Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Well, folks, I hope you're having a fantastic day and an even better week. Folks, in this video, we're going to jump into talking a little bit about, well, let's just put it this way. Today, we're going to talk about riding the wave. You're like, what? We're going to talk about waves, all right, and not ocean waves, although who knows, we might work that in. But we're going to talk about some waves in many aspects. And obviously, when we're talking about anything, a lot of times we jump in talking about organizational culture. But as we all know, that's where we come together usually as groups or as teams, right? But this can also be civic organizations, our churches, other things we're involved with, family, friend groups, all the things, right? Relationships, it doesn't matter. Everything ripples and connects, right? Everything is connected. And so are waves. So we're going to talk a little bit about some waves. So we got the whiteboard today. Just going to kind of play around a little bit with it. And so let's just talk a little bit about let's look at ourselves as a wave, okay? And don't worry, we're not going to get stuck on this one thing. We're going to travel, we're going to travel somewhere on our wave. We're going to surf the wave. So this might be us, right? So imagine, you wake up, and your day, it takes you a little bit to get going. But then as you build some momentum, build up a head of steam, and everything's going great, and then you eat lunch, right? By the time you get to lunch, eat lunch, and then get the case of the sleepies, a little tired, things kind of dip down, and then you're trying to push through, but maybe you're struggling. Obviously, this isn't going to be every day in every scenario and every hour, and then it's like, okay, and then I'm heading home, and so bottom line is there's a general flow, right? There's a general energy, a swing of up and down to our energy throughout the day. This could be every hour, right? This could be the first 15 minutes, the second 15 minutes, the third, and so on, right? This could be any snapshot in time, really, of us as human beings. Before I did this video about 30 or 40 minutes ago, and it's a little bit later in the evening right now, I got hit with a major case of the whoa, and I got tired, right? And I was like, okay, just kind of chill out for a little bit, get my energy, drink some water, whatever, and build up some of that energy level again, right? Why? Because when I'm doing this video, what do I want to do? I want to be at least energized enough to be able to deliver whatever topic we're talking about, right? It wouldn't be doing you or me any good if I did it when I was at my low ebb. Now, we don't always have the choice, right? Life is what life is, and we sometimes just have to ride it out and get through the day. But again, this could represent any one of us. Now, imagine this. You get to control your energy level through the day, okay? So while this example of the wave, right, the sine wave is can be representative of us, we get to choose, right, our attitudes, our thoughts. If I'm optimistic, right? If I'm optimistic, hopeful, eager, right? Generally, the more positive, right? False positivity doesn't work, folks. But what does is looking forward to something, being eager about something, looking forward to, working with some of your team or, seeing your friends, whatever it is, right? Whatever sparks your day. Maybe the work itself, the artistry of what you do, your craft, feeling good about accomplishing something by the end of the day, hitting targets and goals, right? You might be competitive with yourself or others, right? In a fun way, hopefully. But we can fuel that positive side. Now, we can also look at this like, well, Things are going great. Oh my gosh, things are terrible. Things are going great. Oh my gosh, things are terrible, right? If the external in our environment is such, then it can also have an influence, but who's ultimately in control of how we feel about things? We are, right? And I talked before about how when I would drive before, if somebody cuts me off or sort of some kind of, heinous other driver activity, I would get a little irritated, right? But the irritation is on me, right? They don't care. They could care less. They didn't care personally about me whatsoever. But we can take things personally sometimes, right? And sometimes there is legitimacy to that. But oftentimes it's how we receive something and what we choose to do with it, right? So an external environment thing will have a wave and it hits us, and it might hit us, in contrast to our energy, and then basically do what? Set us kind of reeling, if you will. It can kind of spin us up, right? Get us, amped up, maybe bummed out, all the things, right? So we have to be cognizant, and this is just a visual way of going, hey, the external environment is no less important than how we receive and then what we do, the actions we take, right? Clean that up. So what we do, what we say, what we think, what we say, what we do matters, right? It matters and ends up becoming the result at the end of our day. Could be the end of an hour, could be the end of a week, end of the month, right? Whether it's personal life, professional, doesn't matter. But what we want is a predictable, smooth wave, right? So think of it like your frequency. In this case, it's not going to be a one-to-one because we're not talking about high frequency, low frequency necessarily, but we are talking about your variation now. The variation in our emotion, right? The variation in our attitude, which is actually tied to our emotion, right? But the variation internally, but then also us externally, and then our outer environment, right? So you've got three different things going on all at once. So that's the outer environment. This is you, right? You're pretty chill coming in for the day, right? And then you get hit with external forces, as we kind of talked about a little bit before. And then it raises, or in this case, would actually technically lower. So now you got more of a dip, right? Because you're being, say, negatively affected by a negative aspect. So your external environment can then push on you individually. And then when it pushes on you, if you react, right? This is that whole respond, don't react. Take something in, understand where it's coming from. And this is where knowledge is important, because the more knowledge you have about why something happened and the genesis of, mistakes that are made, negative attitudes that others have too, right? And this can also be different people in your organization. You could have somebody who's like this, and what do you think they're doing? If they're all over the map, what do you think they're doing to a pretty predictable workforce, right? Predictable group, predictable team, predictable individuals who are like, yep, we got it, we're getting the work done, right? We're not getting distracted. Remember, this is variation, so we're not getting distracted by a whole lot of things. This person is getting distracted. This could be a person, this could be another department, this could be an entire organization right here. This could be your leadership team, always freaking out every time something goes, a little off kilter, right? And don't get me wrong, you should take appropriate actions to get things done and to make corrective corrections and make decisions to get those corrective actions done. But we're not talking about taking normal actions. What we're talking about is people who are reacting now, right? Leadership teams who are reacting, right? And then the team, if the team is cool and they're like, hey, yeah, okay, we can do what we need to do. We didn't know that you didn't talk to maintenance to get things done, right? So a team can be pretty cool. And then vice versa, you could have a management team, right? Leadership team who's pretty cool and calm and collected, but the workforce is, all over the map. Again, there can be reasons, right? For both groups, depending on who they are and what's going on. There can be reasons things need to be done to handle it. In this case, hey, we don't have the resources we need, and we're irritated by that, right? Management team, they may be cool, calm, and collected, but they need to be cool, calm, and collected to get it done and to make the corrections and corrective actions to get the resources. And because they're in control doesn't mean they have to be freaking out, right, to respond. The response doesn't have to equal the imbibed chaos that others might feel, right? Now, that said, you could have a team who doesn't care and then be cool, calm, and collected and just they're getting it done, right? They're not distracted by silly things, but maybe they're not invested. And then what happens? Leadership team, they're freaking out because they can tell that you're not invested, right? And that's irritating them. So there's a chasm there between these two things. And so this is where you see a lot of mayhem happen. And this often happens when you have leadership teams who aren't prepared. They don't prepare well, they don't plan well, they don't provide resources well, they don't engage well, they don't communicate well. They're typically frustrated a lot because they're really just frustrated at themselves. Because if they develop their team and do all the right things, you may have a day where things are a little off kilter. You may have an hour here or there, but you're not going to be in a constant state of, constant twirl, right? And that said, you may have a management team who also isn't super invested. They're playing a part. And so they never get their feathers ruffled at all, but it could be because they're not invested. So you see, it doesn't necessarily emanate or exactly reflect any of these states that somebody is doing the right thing or not doing the right thing, not being accountable and having ownership, or not having accountability or taking ownership, right? Context matters when it talks about energy. You could have somebody come in and work for your organization just starting out. They're just like all over the map. But what? They have a great attitude, right? They have a great attitude and they want to learn, but they also may be highly distracting, right, to your team. And you may have team members that have been there a long time who are just kind of, okay, yeah, we're doing the work we got to do. But they're not nearly as enthusiastic as this individual here, who's coming in and really excited about working there and the product you make and the service you provide. And they're all stoked and they just want to, hey, this is great, and I can't, just want to be involved with the team, and they're excited, have that genuine fire, right? That's what you love. But we know that can't be sustained for a long time, and eventually they'll calm down a little bit, right? And that's great, that's good. But you also don't want to put their fire out either. And how much of that contrast is this person, in this example, this person is getting a lot done, right? Maybe, a lot more than people who've been there a while. But these folks don't like that, so what are they going to do? They may start to throw some wrenches in the monkey works for this individual here, right? They come in with a negative attitude or start to kind of rain on their parade, start showing some dips, right, toward this individual here, right? Now, this could be individual. This could be a department. This could be an organization. It could be different sites. It could be, because there's HR. I use HR sometimes as an example. You may have an enthusiastic team at one site, right? And they're doing great off the chain. And then HR comes in and maybe they don't like something, so they start kind of getting into their business, and rather than just dealing with the facts of the matter and things that are, nothing heinous, of course, but if it's just, admin and things of that nature, oh, hey, we're not doing this paperwork or making these entries correctly, that sort of stuff, right? Not stuff that is actually value added, right? Non-value added stuff. They can come in and upset. And I use that as an example because, that or any other functional leader within an organization could come in and really be a rain on anybody's parade rather than going, hey, yeah, and getting in line with the great attitude that's already there. So, and you see this every once in a while where corporate leadership will come into a site and just, throw people off sideways. And then different places you might go, and then you hear it from the broader team where they're not really fond of some of the folks that come from the higher levels of management. And why is that? Because their energy levels down here, they're not as really, if they're non-value added roles, they're not pumped up about the job that they're doing. They're not pumped up about the team. They don't, ultimately, they don't care as much about the team than the team does about them, than the team cares about itself, right? So in all of these examples, you could have fluctuations in energy, right? Stemming from attitude, stemming from having that optimism, having that hopeful eagerness, right? To succeed, right? To do well, right? To hit goals. And again, because it can be a flip-flop, you can have, some corporate leadership come in and they're all enthusiastic and charged up and the team is not happy because of whatever the case may be. They're kind of hanging in there, doing their thing, and somebody comes from off-site all charged up saying, hey, yeah, we need to get 20% more productivity. But yet they're disconnected from the reality of the situation because the site leader may not be providing the resources needed to get that work done, right? So there can be a mismatch. You can have energy matches, but yet execution is not proper, is not functionally working, right? It's not working out. The site leaders may not be providing the resources. They aren't engaging. They aren't developing. And then, so you have different things happening, and you've got this, I'm going to say mismatch, but you do have a mix, right? Now, this can also be people on the same team, right? Hold on a second. Let me clear this up. So this can also be people on the same team, right? You can have 10 people working on a team within a department or whatnot, with an organization. And each one of them are in a different variation, and that's real, right? You have somebody who, and then think about real life too. Somebody, say they just had a child, so they're not getting all the sleep at night, maybe, newborn. They aren't getting the sleep that they need, so they're kind of, struggling for a while until they kind of get their bearings with that. You have somebody else who avid coffee drinker, for example, and is always supercharged, right? And, and just chitter chatter, chatterbug. And you just have a mix of different scenarios, real life outside of work scenarios, right? And this is also affecting the energy levels of people and their attitude. And so it's important to be cognizant, right? To be aware of our teammates, to be aware of others around us. And you do see this too. This happens when people come together, is their energy and their flow will start to sync up. Now, where that can be a caution is you have them sync up, and there's a lot of variation in a process, right? And they're not really efficient. They're not moving, at their optimal speed, right? They're not really engaged and excited about what they're doing. They're kind of just getting through it, but there's a lot of variation. If you were to look at this, and this perfection would be that green line in the middle. You won't achieve perfection, but what you want to do is reduce variation. And so if people get lackadaisical, if they get lackadaisical like this, you have all this variation because they just don't have focus. They don't care. They've lost their mojo, right? Maybe they're bored. Maybe they've been doing the same thing too long. They haven't had the opportunity to cross-train it, all the things. They haven't been engaged with leadership and management. So nobody's listening to them. They don't have a voice, right? They have a bunch of cool ideas, but nobody wants to listen to their cool ideas, right? And so that can happen because the ideal, we know perfection isn't possible. But what you want to do is reduce variation in your processes and all of that. But you can't get there. Foot stomp this now. Foot stomping. You can't get there if individuals, the individual themselves, and this is what I come back to, you often heard me talk, if you've watched any videos at all, about protecting love. I put it in the book. Look, you're going to do the best that you can, and you're not going to waste a lot of time and energy doing things that aren't necessary, right? You're not going to straggle. You're going to do what you need to do because you care about what? The customer. And everybody in your circle is your customer, right? Everybody on your team, your family, your friends, everybody is your customer. Even you are your customer. You want to be able to effectively get things done that you need to get done. But you get to determine, right, your emotions, right, your thoughts, your words and your actions, your emotions. Am I responding or am I reacting, right, to a situation? Am I letting others pull me down because maybe they've got a little bit of bad attitude or things going sideways in their life? To be there for somebody isn't to get caught up in their tidal wave, right? To be there for them is to say, hey, I empathize with what you're going through. What can I do to help you out, right? To be a service to others. But you're not going to do that if you're kind of dispassionate about what you're doing and about your team and about your customers. You're just not going to. And you'll never get your processes to align and the variation to be squeezed out. And this is what's been missed for decades, folks. For decades. It begins with the individual. The individual. It starts. You will never have 90% effectiveness, right? Effectiveness in your organization. If your employees, right? If your entire team, all of them, average 75% in their performance, meaning that's an average, right? So if you have plenty below that and a few above that, right? You're never going to get there. Do you think that's because they're not capable? No. All of us are capable of getting there. But it doesn't happen because we go from wood hammers to metal hammers. Okay? It doesn't happen. Yes, you'll make some strides forward with some tools, some techniques, and some reorganizing, some 5S, right? And some lean practices you can put in place. Visual management, a lot of cool things you can put in place, right? We can improve you. I can improve you in no time flat, 17, 19%, probably within 3 or 4 months tops. But you're not going to sustain it. You're not going to sustain it, and you may only be performing 55 now, so what's 20% more than that? It's still 75, right? You're still kind of getting an F on your report card. So what does that mean? Comes back to the individual. If the individual doesn't feel it here, if we got kind of a problem with our, like in Rocky, when he says, you got a ticker problem, when Mick tells him, you got a ticker problem. If your heart's not in it, folks, if your heart's not in it, you're dragging your team down. Just bottom line. If you're the individual as a part of the organization, anywhere in the organization, doesn't matter if you're the CEO all the way to the brand new employee. If your heart's not in what you're doing, then don't be on that team because you're not helping them, right? And there's probably others who aren't helping them either, right? And if you're an organization, you're not helping your team, you're not providing the resources, doing all the appropriate leadership things. That's the same ticker problem. You don't care enough to develop your team? Well, I don't want them moving on to another company to be, well, I'm going to spend a bunch of time, energy, and resources to make them better. You're not going to get them to stay because you don't, right? It's a fallacy of logic. It's like, well, I'm not going to feed them because if I feed them, then they'll be comfortable and they'll go somewhere else. Makes no sense. Makes no sense. So you're going to starve out your employees? Come on, that's ridiculous. Ultimately, if you're showing a greater than 5 or 6% turnover, right, then you've got holes in your boat. I mean, it's just the bottom line. 5 or 6%, yeah, that pretty much says that you have normal turnover for normal things, right? Somebody gets promoted, they get a better job somewhere else, whatever, normal good stuff. But if you got a greater than 5 or 6% turnover, then you got issues, and they're probably somewhat insidious, and you don't really realize it. If you're using contract services to keep your plants full of people, you basically that's a yellow flag turning red that your organization is literally dumping waste out in bucketfuls out onto the ground. You're just dumping money out onto the ground all around your building, and you don't even realize it because you probably have a turnover of like 22 to 40%. And you've basically been able to write some of that off. It's all gimmickry, right? You've got so much variation that it's almost ridiculous. It's such ridiculous, and you're passing the cost directly on to customers. Complete fallacy. Complete fallacy. A team should have no problem, right, to improve how they operate, the entire organization, small site, large site, multiple sites, a large corporation, doesn't matter. If your people don't have their ticker, if their heart isn't in it, then you can do all the things you want. You're never going to get the performance you want out of them. You're never going to get there, period, dot. You can just mail that one in. Until you're able to actually get in there and build your teams, build team cohesion. And that's essentially what it is, folks. You're going to ride this wave. You're either going to get beat by the waves of variation or you're going to tame those waves. Are you brave enough to tame them, or is it just easier to phone it in and to have $5.5 trillion in GDP waste laying on the ground in the United States? It's a simple equation, folks, right? Nobody's forcing anybody to perform poorly. Nobody's twisting anybody's arm to perform poorly, right? And this wouldn't matter if we're talking about an organization that produces things, say a manufacturer or a hospital, a clinic, a store down the road, a grocery store. It doesn't matter where you're coming from. This applies to every single, or it wouldn't matter if this is a church. It wouldn't matter if this is a civic organization or government, right? Same paradigm. If your heart's not in it, then you're dumping variation waste all over the place. And you guys are better than this. I know it, because if you're watching this, you want to be better, and there's a reason why you're watching this video. But the next question is how do we get there? Well, short of reading my book, the way you get there is you have to engage with your team. You have to do what's necessary and correct. And you can't step over dollars to save dimes by not developing your team, engaging well, communicating well, and providing the resources necessary to build the culture. Then the culture will then start to turn back in to produce and create more of a perpetual motion. But you're not going to get there through gimmickry or just functional changes. You're just not going to do it. It's a human issue. It's a human being issue, not a do I have the right hammer and chisel issue. Okay? All right, folks, that's going to be enough for today of riding that wave. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Remember, hit that good green domino 3 to 5 times a day to uplift, motivate, inspire, and just encourage one another. When you do that, not only helping to transform culture, but we're transforming ourselves. But remember, we can't transform anything on the outside, right? Unless we're willing to transform on the inside, get that ticker in alignment, right? All right, folks, hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.